Okay, we're going to read the story he tells again today. The other day we talked about inferences when we use our schema and our what we read in the text or the pictures to help inference, to help know things that the author doesn't tell us. But today we're going to focus on main idea or central idea, what the text is mostly about. So before we start, we're going to do our 4 vocabulary words. We have pride. Remember, pride means something that you did well. You're pleased with something you did well. You had pride in picking up the trash. Overflowing means that it goes over. It's full. No more, nothing else can fit in it. So this water glass is overflowing. Elders is someone that's older than you. So this man is her elder. Ashamed means you're not proud. It's opposite of being proud. It's you feel bad about something you did instead of you feel good about something you did. So he is ashamed. The puppy's ashamed that he got into the trash can. Okay, so the story tells the story of Joseph Bruchac. Remember, this is a biography. Biographies tell about someone's life. Let's go to the first one. Joseph Bruchac III was born on October 16, 1942. He was born in Saratoga Springs, New York. His parents' name was Joseph Jr. and Mary and Flora Bowman. Joseph grew up in Greenfield Center, New York. That is the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains. So here a picture, it shows the caption that this is Joseph in 2nd grade. That's what the caption says. Joseph was raised by his mother's parents. His grandfather was an Abenaki Indian. He had a strong love for animals and nature. His grandmother was one of the first women to ever graduate from Albany Law School. She liked books and learning. So this caption tells me this is Albany Law School. So how do you know? So I know this is a biography, right? So how does that help me decide what this story is mostly about, what its topic is? Well, I know a biography is about a person. So that means the main topic of a biography is going to be a person. So who is the main topic of this story? Who's this story about? I know that it's a biography, so therefore I know that the topic is a person. Because all biographies are about a person. So what is the topic of this story? Sydney? Joseph what? What's his last name? Bruchac. Yes. Bruchac. That's a hard one, huh? Bruchac. Joseph Bruchac. The text is a biography. A biography gives information about his person's life. So that tells me the topic of it is Joseph Bruchac. So what did you learn about Joseph so far as a young boy? What did you learn about him as a young boy so far? On these 2 pages, what did we learn about him? What are some of the details we learned about Joseph Bruchac? Boys and girls, we've all read this story now twice, and some of you 3 times from reading it at your house. What did we learn about Joseph Bruchac when he was a young child? I want you to turn and talk to someone. What have you learned on these 2 pages?
Greenfield Center, New York.
Right. He grew up in Greenfield Center, New York. In the, what kind of mountains did he grow up? What were the mountains called, Corbin? Adirondack. That's another hard word. Adirondack Mountains. So he grew up there. And who was he raised by? Who was he raised by in his childhood? Emsley? So those were his, they weren't his parents, they were his, no, well, there's mother's parents, but what do we call our mother's parents? We call them our what? Emery? Grandparents. So he's raised by his grandparents in the country, right? In the country. Well, they're his elders, yes. Okay, so that was his childhood. He grew up in Greenfield Center, New York in the Adirondack Mountains, and he was raised by his grandparents in the country. I put all that here because that's all his childhood. I wanted to put that in his childhood. All right. So what effect did where Joseph lived have on the rest of his life? Let's read on and maybe we'll find that out. I think that tells us more on this next page. Joseph's grandparents ran a small general store and gas station right next to the house where he grew up. The store was on one of the main roads into the Adirondack Mountains. As a boy, Joseph loved to hear all the stories and tall tales told by the people who came into the store. So there's Joseph's family general store. So we've already read this story a couple times. So how does the people that come into his store change the way his life will be? What does it do for his life? What is he going to become later as an adult? What did he become, Xavier? A storyteller. So do you think you got that from all the people that came in the store and told him stories? Yeah, remember, let me read this. As a boy, Joseph loved to hear all the stories and tell tall tales told by the people who came into his store. So that changed his life, all those stories. That's what made him want to become, one of the reasons that made him want to become a storyteller. There were not many children out in the country where Joseph lived. Because of this, he often played by himself in the forest. Sometimes he would walk by Grandpa Jesse's side. Grandpa Jesse taught Joseph a lot about animals, nature, and gardening. He never spoke much about his Native American background. Grandpa Jesse and his family and other Native Americans had been treated badly. Grandpa Jesse said he left school when he was in 4th grade. Why? He was being called mean names. Hearing such family stories made Joseph feel sad. It also made him want to learn more. He wanted to learn the stories and traditions his grandfather was too ashamed to share. Remember, ashamed was he wasn't proud of those stories. Joseph's grandmother passed on to him a love of school. With this, Joseph went to college at Cornell University. While in college, he began to learn everything he could learn about Native American ways and beliefs. As an adult, Joseph traveled the country meeting Native American elders. These elders gladly shared their stories and traditions with him. I see several of us not looking at our book and doing something else. You should be reading along with me. Joseph and his wife Carol met in college. They married and had 2 sons named James and Jesse. Joseph was overflowing. Remember, overflowing means they were just pouring out of him with stories that he would often retell to his 2 sons. Before long, Joseph began to share the stories with others outside the family. Times had changed a lot since Grandpa Jesse left school. Now when Joseph told the stories, people listened and were interested. They felt Joseph's retellings were important. They respected him. Joseph also began to write stories in books. So what is this part of the story mostly about? What did he learn about when he was in school? Grant, what did he learn about when he was in school? Yes, he did. So he went to college. What college did he go to? What was the name of the college he went to? Chase? Cornell. Yep, Cornell University. He went to Cornell University and learned about Native Americans. All right, so he learned about Native Americans, and then he became famous for what? What did he become famous for? What did he become famous for, Emery? Telling stories, that's right. Let's go to the next page. In just a few years, Joseph Bruchac became known all across the world as a Native American storyteller. He has won many awards for his storytelling. Joseph has also written more than 120 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Most of the books are about Native Americans. So Joseph connects with audiences around the world. Okay, growing up, learning about Native American traditions, James and Jesse are also storytellers. Joseph's oldest son, James, is also a wilderness and tracking expert. His younger son, Jesse, teaches the Abenaki language. So there's Jesse, James, and Joseph Bruchac. Joseph still lives in the house where he grew up. He writes and shares stories almost every day. He takes extra pride in seeing a love for stories continue to his grandkids. He and his sons continue to help pass along these once hidden traditions to future generations. Joseph and his grandchildren. That's the picture that we see there. All right, so this is mostly about a boy that grew up in Greenfield Center. That's one of my details. He went to Cornell University and learned about Native Americans. And he wrote and told stories all over the world. So he became known as, what did he become known? Not just a storyteller, but what was the main stories that he told? So this story isn't just about Joseph Bruchac. What's the main idea? He told what kind of stories?
Native American.
Right. No, Joseph Bruchac is famous for telling Native American stories. Okay, I want you to close your book and put it away, and I want you to look up here again. So put your book away. So while we were reading this story, we were trying to decide what the topic was, the person or thing the text is about. So if it's a book about cars, you'd write cars there. If it's a book about a person, you write the person's name. And that's what it was. It was a biography, so we wrote Joseph Bruchac. And the central idea is the most important idea or point about the topic. Well, this book just wasn't about Joseph Bruchac. It was that Joseph Bruchac was a famous Native American storyteller. And then there's lots of things that support that. So where he grew up made him want to be a Native American storyteller, right? So that's important. So he grew up in the country in the Adirondack Mountains. We could even put that he heard stories when he grew up. He went to Cornell University and learned about Native Americans. That's an important part of him becoming a famous storyteller. And he wrote and told stories all over the world. That's what helped him become famous. So these three details help support this main idea or this main topic, the central topic or central idea.